Tutorial Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials about nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today is myself, your nerdy tutor George, and with me here today, future professional weeb, my mom.
Well, I was going to call myself Manga Mama.
There we go, we can do Manga Mama, that's awesome. Alrighty, so last week we were discussing Japanese manga, and I gave a little collection of stuff here to read through. And so, what do you want to talk about first, Mom?
Well, okay, so as an overall writing theme, and we talked about this a little bit maybe last week, or we've talked about this a couple times with regard to Japanese society. There is a great deal of work ethic and the concept of earning. There's a very strong moral, but it's a slightly different morality than you would have in, say, Disney.
Yep.
Because there's very much a Disney princess, all she has to do is wake up with a kiss. She hasn't done a whole lot of work there to earn that.
No.
Even Rapunzel ventures out of the house in the movie Entangled, ventures out of the house but things generally
end up well for her at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Ariel signs her life away in return for legs. But they haven't done a great deal. There's certainly a moral, they're moral tales, but these are very moral in a different way. I'm trying to, virtue-driven. How's that?
Virtue is a good way to describe it, yeah.
Okay, so virtue-driven.
Yeah, a lot of the time I find the Japanese... the difference between kind of an American story and a Japanese story is a plot that's meant to overcome the odds in American kind of culture. Like, if you go back to our Game of Thrones, it's all about this giant overarching plot, and while there's growth through all these characters, you feel as if all the characters are being pushed through this plot at the end of the day, rather than the characters, in some cases, necessarily driving the plot.
It's what happens to them rather than what they make happen.
Precisely. But Game of Thrones is a little bit different because it's one of the more, I would say, more kind of Eastern style, where a lot of the characters do kind of drive a lot of that plot. But it certainly doesn't feel like it in the long run here. Versus where in a lot of Western anime, it's all very much the characters pushing it forward. And a lot of the times, especially with Japanese manga here, is like whatever you did in the past stays with you throughout the entire show.
There's a lot of karma.
There's a lot of karma, or just a lot of like if you lose an arm, well, you lost an arm. You don't get it back unless you find either a supernatural way to get it back or you get it replaced by something else. And that's very true for one of our shows. For one of the manga that we had you read here, is that they lost something, and they're on kind of a quest to get it back, but they don't have it.
They don't have it.
And then that's an overarching theme throughout the entire show is loss and getting stuff back as a result.
Okay, so that would be my overarching theme would be that it's very virtue driven, and there's a lot of you don't get to reap unless you sow.
Well, I also find it to be a lot of character driven too.
It is character driven, but there's a lot of you work hard for it.
Yeah, you work hard for what it is, and that's kind of an instilled kind of virtue in Japanese culture in general. I mean, even if you go back to the word otaku, which for American parlance we kind of think of it as like, oh, you're an otaku, oh, you're into Japanese culture and you're into like anime and manga. But in Japan, if you're an otaku, the word for otaku is kind of like dedication to something in a lot of cases. So you might be a military otaku, which means you're into military sort of knowledge.
Well, Food Wars.
Food Wars, yes. You might be a chef otaku here in that case. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So which one did you want to start off with first, or did you want to just go through the list?
I think we'll let you drive it, and I'll here. So I'll give you a couple of other just starting things for notes for people who haven't done this before. Flipping backwards through stuff is fucking hard. Excuse my French. The whole thing that you start at the right and have to move the dot over to the left to flip your pages, and that was true on several of them.
You mean from right to left, yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, so you're flipping backwards through the pages, and then my eye automatically wants to start on the left, and you can't. I mean, even just going down the page, training yourself to go from right to left as you read through these
It's tricky.
is tricky. It's hard. So I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go back and reread it again. So it took me several
tries.
Yeah, several tries, and I had to do a modest relearn every time because I did this in 3 different sittings.
Yeah, which is true with a lot of manga.
Okay, so I had to retrain myself again. Oh, that's right. It's this way. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, you had mentioned it. It is everything I looked at was black and white, with the exception of a couple of color
pages
yes. Here and there. Everything was black and white, and so I think I had this idea that it was going to be more like
monochrome, maybe.
Well, yeah. So American comics are black and white. They're black and white.
They're black and white, but they'd be depending on what kind of comics.
There might be shading that's drawn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like little hash mark sort of things.
Yeah.
This isn't that. The art in it is, I would say, a much higher quality than even my granddaughters are into, especially the 8-year-old, very much into graphic novels.
Yes.
Essentially, anime, American style. So they're very much into that. And if I look at the drawings for that, even when that's in color, it isn't done with the skill set that this is done with. I think the use of shading, sort of a charcoal sort of shading sort of thing, the art very different. The art styles amongst these
very dramatically in some cases.
Yes. Yeah, very dramatically. I mean, there's one that's Sailor Moonish.
Oh, it was very, very pretty looking, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh God, I would. So we'll come to that anyway. But even as different as the styles were, the quality of the drawing. And this goes back to, you said they're producing these once a week. I just can't even begin to imagine, because even though when you talk about 20 pages, you're talking about really a maximum of 6 to 8 squares per page.
Yes, and some depending on the page.
And most of them were say maybe 4 squares and a big square.
Yeah.
4 smaller squares. So per page, you're looking at 5-6 drawings, 4, 5, 6 drawings. Mm-hmm. And sometimes just one, and maybe sometimes one that splashes both pages.
Oh, yeah.
If something big happens. Even at that, my concept of how you would get this done in a week, even if you have multiple illustrators, kind of blows me away. Mm-hmm. So that would be my comment number 1.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
And by the way, I'm so into this, I've put down my knitting.
That's okay.
Which none of you realize, but
yeah,
I'm almost always knitting while we're doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't have to look while knitting. I can knit with that. But I'm using my hands here, so I can't. So that would be another one of my comments. The quality of it is sort of like comparing old style cartooning to Disney style cartooning, like
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a comparison to maybe old, very classic Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse to what's considered high definition Mickey Mouse today.
Yeah. So the difference in the quality of cartooning, for lack of a better word, really struck me.
There's also kind of a weight to a lot of the characters too. Like when they're moving around, they feel very heavy or more realistic in a lot of cases, and sometimes a little cartoony in some places, but a lot of the motion seems like it has a lot of weight and
very, very, very much drawn in a real life style, even though they're cartoon characters.
Yeah, with a certain level of stylization and character kind of look to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think that's a good observation, and I guess the my last overarching comment was the same comment that I had regarding anime, and that's that but only emphasized even more so. Mm-hmm. And that's that. Within the manga, rather than being story-driven or event-driven, they're more internalized. So they're more
on a smaller scale and more personal.
Yeah. So one of my I had this I think I made the same comment when I was watching anime, and this is even that sort of even hyped up more so. and that's that you see a lot of how they think. A lot of the thought bubbles are really thought bubbles, and I find it very candid in terms of realistically portraying how someone would feel.
The immediacy of their thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, and the intimacy.
Oh, yeah.
And I found that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You see people struggle.
Oh, absolutely. So
and you have a real sense of it. So from that end, I was quite taken. I could see where you could get caught up in this and be down
lost.
at 7-Eleven every
every week. Yeah, a favorite pastime when I used to have another job where I traveled a lot, and you would have downtimes and sometimes hours to waste, would be to go into a Barnes and Noble, which I remember a lot of people doing. Go to the Japanese manga section, pick out a bunch of books.
Barnes and Noble carries this?
Yes, Barnes and Nobles, Borders when they were still around. Like, a lot of bookstores carried these in quite a bit, and sometimes like an entire full section.
I did not realize.
Yeah, and what you would do is you would just take a couple books that you thought were interesting, or or maybe like 7 or 8 books of a series. You'd find yourself a chair and you just plop them down and read.
Now, are they translated?
Oh yeah, they're in full English.
Okay.
Yeah, just on the other side of the computer here is like a whole bunch of translated manga books that I have.
Oh, okay.
I even have like a few full series here as well.
Okay.
So yeah, but let's go ahead and start off with one of our favorite series here, which is going to be Full Metal Alchemist.
Okay, so I totally get that.
Yeah. So Full Metal Alchemist is the story of Edward Elric and his little brother Alphonse Elric, which are about a year and a half
Little
apart. Little brother, even though it doesn't look little, but he's definitely the little brother. They're in a world where alchemy basically is this notion here where you can generate energy into the ground through a transmutational circle, and as a result of nearby components, you can remake stuff. So if you were to say a broken radio here, if you have all the parts for the broken radio, you make a circle and you can remake the radio back into whole at the end of the day by using all the same parts. And there's a particular rule in this series. There's a couple particular rules.
And he does remake a radio, by the way.
In the example. There's 2 specific rules that are in this anime here, or in this manga here, that the law of equivalent exchange, which means that you can't give up something without getting the exact same thing in return. So as a result here, like, you can't, like, if you were going to make like a statue out of like a marble with alchemy, you can only make it with as much marble as you actually have access to. So you couldn't make it out of extra marble that wasn't around, or if you had to, you would have to make it hollow on the inside or thinner walls or not quite so thick. But you can only use as much material as you have. So the notion in the story here is that you only can do what you can do with what you give. So you have to give an equal price, and you get an equal return out of it.
Okay, so just first off, the funny thing was, the day before I read this, I was standing in front of a display at a museum that talked about Renaissance and Middle Age alchemists.
Yes.
And alchemists are sort of this blending of philosophy and chemistry.
Oh, yes.
And so in terms of their historical relevance, and they existed around the world, it was a really interesting
kind of science back in the day.
Yeah.
If it existed.
That it blended to the point where some people referred to them as magicians, which they weren't, but it took physics, it took philosophy, it took chemistry, and blended it all to an outcome. And that's very much what these 2 brothers are doing. So one of the first things I noticed was, as you first enter it, and the first one was 53 pages.
Yeah, so Full Metal Alchemist is an example of a monthly running series. So it ran once a month in a book that had a bunch of stories in it once a month.
Oh, okay. So it's sort of like an anthology.
Yeah, so every month it would have one chapter in it from like maybe like a dozen different stories in it, versus like where your traditional Shonen Jump, which came out every week, would have anywhere from maybe 16 to 20 stories in it most of the time.
Okay.
So these were a lot of cases with monthly shows, with monthly series. Sometimes a lot more happens in them, and sometimes the art is even more prettier because you have almost an entire month to do it. But a lot of the cases here, like the people who are doing this, who are doing a monthly series, might also be doing a weekly series as well, or might be doing 2 monthly series.
Which again, just
boggles the mind.
I'm back to how do you get this artwork done, because the artwork is so detailed. This isn't somebody just sketching. Although one of these is about creating and drawing. One of the ones you have me look at.
Yes.
Okay, so in the first in the entry, it talks about the lessons with situations that are painless. Are lessons without meaning.
Absolutely.
And it actually, it's specific. I forget exactly how they phrase it, but that is, because I paraphrased it in my notes, but that's exactly what it says. And that's right as you enter it.
Oh, yeah. So it immediately tells you kind of what it's going to be about at the end of the day.
Yeah. There is, interestingly enough, because you're half Greek, a reference to Icarus. In
the story immediately.
In the story pretty early on, because they're talking about Leto, who is the god of the sun. And basically, again, the younger brother is a robot. No. Okay, what is the younger brother?
So, to make this make more sense for you here, and they kind of paint it in the chapter in between the. They paint it very much in the beginning and then a little bit afterwards, but here's kind of the full story of it, because it ends up diving into it a little bit later on in the manga than necessarily.
Because I wasn't necessarily getting exactly what was happening there.
So what had happened was that when Edward and Al were really young, then they were like in like 3rd or 4th grade, their mom died. And one of the tenets of alchemy here is that you don't do human transmutation, which means that you don't try to make humans or try to bring back the dead through alchemy at the end of the day, because it can't be done. What ends up happening here is that the boys, when they get to like 6th grade, have spent the last few years studying alchemy. They were already kind of good at alchemy anyways, and their dad is a really great alchemist that even though he never physically taught them, they kind of like went into his study and learned a lot of his notes.
It's in the blood.
Figured it's in the blood.
And the brothers are well known.
Oh, the brothers are very well known. And what the brothers end up doing here is they do their own kind of formulation, as 6 years old would, and come up with their own version of human transmutation to bring back their mom, because it's not well documented out there how to do it. So they literally get all the stuff they needed to make their mom, and in the process of making their mom, they have what they call in alchemy a rebound, which means something bad happens. And what happened was that Edward lost his left leg, which is why he has a leg with
right.
In the show, they have something kind of like a steampunk sort of like thing called automail, which is how you replace limbs in a lot of cases. So they're kind of like artificial limbs, but they move around just like regular ones.
He has a prosthetic.
He has a prosthetic leg. So Edward loses his left leg initially, and then Al loses his entire body. And it disappears in order to try to bring back their mom, but what they bring back is not exactly a human. It kind of looks a little humanish, but it dies shortly thereafter. Because they didn't actually make a human, they made all the parts that kind of component to a human, like ribs, femurs, muscles, all these things, but like not like a full envelope of skin around the body. Like, it's a horrible mishmash of like a horrible science experiment.
Okay.
In the process here, Edward gains this additional knowledge about alchemy, because in the process of doing human transmutation, you gain more knowledge about alchemy in the world, depending on what price you give up to do it. So in this case here, he gave up his left leg and his little brother to get all this additional knowledge. What he ends up doing is he goes to a suit of armor that was in the corner, does this like blood transmutation circle in it, and then binds the soul of his little brother to this suit of armor. So this entire suit of armor is completely hollow, but it moves around.
Okay.
Because so the entire.
So I wasn't getting that.
Yeah, it's not immediately kind of apparent.
Okay, so the little brother is considerably bigger.
So the little brother is like the size of like a 6'3", 6'4" kind of person, and Edward, who is the older brother, is like a 5'1", maybe 5'5".
And my sense was he was like 16, 17.
They're about like 14, 15 years old.
Okay,
give or take.
Okay.
Yeah. So. This very early story kind of shows off that like they're not quite normal. Edward is known as
they're already well known.
They're already well known because Edward is known as a state alchemist. He's an alchemist who's a part of the government, so he gets extra funding, but if there's a war or need for alchemists to go to a fight, he gets drafted into that fight right away. He kind of holds the title of a major colonel or something like that. Okay. So he holds like a pretty decent title for what he is. So that's how he's well known everywhere. And then the story kind of goes on about how like they're looking for what they call the Philosopher's Stone, which the intention is that if they find this stone, you don't have to pay a toll to use alchemy. You can do alchemy regardless. So the point of the stone, if you in the story here, Father Leto or Father Cornelius or the guy who's using the bad
Cornello.
Yeah, Cornello. This bad priest here essentially is using the stone and making stuff with the Philosopher's Stone and passing it off as like miracles from the sun god Leto.
Okay, so if I can make an interjection here, am I going to piss anybody off by likening him to Joel Osteen?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this is basically
a bad televangelist.
Yeah, Jim Baker. Name your televangelist sort of guy, and there's Rosie, who's this young girl,
very naive and very sweet and innocent, but like thinks she's going to get her friend back or her lover back if she does what he says.
Well, he's pretty much told her that.
Yeah. You'll get to see them again.
You go to see him again, and the lover's passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this sort of, I mean, the things that it conjured up as we were getting to know him. One of the things was the Wizard of Oz, where you see the wizard behind the screen,
and realize they're not the same person that you think they really were,
and realize that it's just a guy.
Yeah.
So you have this sort of televangelist sort of personality who admits that he's just another alchemist.
Yeah.
And he's just so what came across to me there was it could be used for good or evil.
Yeah. Yeah. Alchemy is only what you make of it at the end of the day. There's not any inherent sort of good or bad out of it here. It's essentially what it is you make out of it at the end of the day, whether you do good stuff or bad stuff with it. Which is, again, like a lot of throughout the series here, you'll see a lot of people using alchemy who are not necessarily using it for good reasons or good purposes at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was charmed by the reference to Icarus because your family historically comes from Ikaria, which is named after Icarus.
Yep.
So I thought that was a cute side note. But
what'd you think of the art?
I liked the art very much.
It's kind of got this kind of like Saturday morning kind of feel to it a little bit. It's not overly stylized sort of human beings. They're kind of more like very much caricatures.
Driven. Yeah. So I actually liked the art in all of them. They all had different,
their own kind of unique style.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I liked the art. I liked the stylization of the clothes.
Oh yes.
And that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So because he knows how to dress.
Oh yeah, no. Again, in this one here, I mean, like he's got this kind of really cool red kind of cloak that he's wearing, and he's got.
I have no idea what the colors are.
Oh, so he wears this bright red sort of like cloak that he wears over his, and then the rest of his thing is all black. He's kind of like a black kind of.
He's just very sort of stylish.
Yeah. No, he's got a black kind of. I don't want to say kind of like a school gaku uniform is kind of the way they call it. Like he's got like a kind of school uniform kind of look to him almost, but like without all the buttons down the center. So it's kind of got a little bit of a high collar and it's got sleeves on it. And he also wears gloves, so that way you can't tell that one of his hands is automail at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then Al always looks like Al, but they get a lot of range. But the artist gets a lot of kind of range out of the helmet face at the end of the day, because you can't really change a lot of the perspectives of it. But they do kind of like.
It does have expressions.
It does have expressions, yes.
So and that surprised me because it is. To me, it looks sort of robotic.
You would almost think like kind of an Iron Man, where you couldn't tell what's going on there. It'd be very stoic and similar, but they twist it just enough to get enough expression out of that face to get what you need to.
Yeah, no, I was impressed with that. To me, it added a bit to it.
Yeah. Okay. So would you keep reading this if you had the chance to?
Yeah, actually, I would. I think there were a number of them I wanted to know where they
go to. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and Full Metal Alchemist was one of these great series. They actually had 2 animes done for it. It had one in 2004 that came out, which was right around the same time after about a year of the books being out. So it tells... The beginning portion of it is very similar to the original manga, but later elements of it are not the same. Versus if they had another version that came out in 2009 called Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which follows the story almost linearly, exactly the same. And it coincided, the two of them finished at about the same time, with the manga ending about 2 weeks before the anime ended. So they ended. So it was initially planned that they would both end about the right time, and it was one of those, like, just Americans loved Full Metal Alchemist because it wasn't so Japanesey that you couldn't get into it, but it was so interesting at the end of the day here.
I actually didn't find any of these so Japanesey that I couldn't get into.
Well, I think
there's definitely
there's a lot of heavy elements of Japanese in it, especially in some of the later stuff here.
Yeah,
but like none of them are like so Japanesey that you can't get into it here.
Yeah, there's a cultural cross, but yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay.
So yeah, no, this is a great show if you want to watch it on Netflix. It's fully available there. I highly recommend it. I do recommend, though, if you want to watch it, watch the original series first and then watch Brotherhood. Because Brotherhood, for its first kind of like 10 some odd episodes, is a lot of recap of what was in the original Full Metal Alchemist. And while it's not exactly the same, like, they just goes through stuff so quickly that it doesn't kind of like feel quite right. So if you watch the first one first, it's a completely different story, but you can always watch more of it later, which is a good way to do it. That's how I was told how to watch House of Cards. To watch the British version first and then watch the American version. Because if you watch the American version, you have a lot of hard time watching the British version, which I found to be absolutely correct, because I watched the American version first. All right, so next we go on to the one that I always recommend for people in anime form and manga form, to let people know if they actually are going to be interested in Japanese animation or manga. And this is Death Note.
Okay.
So, Death Note tells the story of a world in which death gods, or as known in the series, known as Shinigami, which is basically like the Grim Reaper here in America, do exist, and what they carry around is like notebooks.
They don't look like the Grim Reaper.
No.
They look like little flying dragons. They actually look like the devil is depicted on a certain religious icon.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
So, in the world in which they exist at, they have a book called a Death Note, and the rules of the Death Note are whoever's name is written in it, so long as you know their name and their face, will die within, I believe, like 40 seconds. I believe it's like 100 seconds or 40 seconds. I don't remember the exact number, but they will die so long as they're written in that book. But if you write out the reason why they die, they'll die of that particular way. So if you tell somebody to go jump off a bridge, they'll jump off a bridge. But if there's no bridge around, they'll just die of a heart attack, which is how they normally die. And the notion is you have to know the name and the face, because if you know the names, like Mick Jagger, and there's another guy named Mick Jagger, you don't kill the wrong one by accident. So that's the intentions at the end of the day.
That makes sense.
And these books are only being usually held by death gods, and then one book falls in the lap of another person.
Well, okay. Let's talk about falls in the lap of.
Well, not necessarily in the lap, but.
Okay, so the Shinigami who basically there's a bored death god.
Ryuk. Yep.
There's a bored death god who decides it'd be fun to see what would happen if you dropped a death book.
A Death
Note. And he actually writes in English, and he explains that he writes it in English because that's the language most common in the world.
He thought would be the most common, and somebody would be able to understand easily if they got it.
Right. So he writes the instructions on how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And he just drops it to whoever finds it.
Yep.
And so this young man finds it. He's a teenager. He's 14, 15?
He is actually 17 years old.
17.
He's in his senior year of high school. His name is
yeah, they do tell us that.
So his name is Light Yagami. He's like a honor roll student. He's going to be valedictorian.
And he's referred to as Light, which I found very confusing, because I thought it was in the text they refer to him as Light.
Yes.
And I found that very confusing because I kept thinking they meant the word light because they're spelling it the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, that part's a little confusing.
It took me a bit to catch on to that.
Yes.
when he first finds the book, he's not sure it's for real, but somebody's written out a lot of instructions. Kind of gotta be. Not really sure.
Must be some sort of like somebody's practical joke sort of thing.
Yeah, not certain. And so he turns on the TV onto the news station, and there's a hostage situation.
Yep.
And he writes down. He hears the person's name, and he writes down. He sees the face, and he writes down the person's name. And he doesn't put how the person's going to die, so the person has
a heart attack.
A heart attack. So if you leave it blank, you get a heart attack.
You just get a heart attack within like 60 seconds, I think is the time.
Yeah. So he's waiting, watching the TV. It's like the longest 40 seconds ever. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden hostages start coming out.
Yeah, it's like a few minutes and people start like leaving the building and everyone's like, well, how'd you guys get out? How'd you guys get free? He just had a heart attack. So he just passed out and had a heart attack.
Yeah.
So then what does he do, Mom? What does he do?
All of a sudden he realizes that he has this power, and he has a moral dilemma here. Mm-hmm. And he reasons for, and this is where I go to the candor and the intimacy of people's thoughts, mm-hmm. which to me seems so very sort of reasonable and genuine. He goes through a whole sort of now what do I do? What do I do? And he figures out that he's going to be a vigilante.
Well, he doesn't say that he's a vigilante.
He doesn't say that.
But he decides that he's going to use it for what he thinks is good at the end of the day. So this would be like a chaotic good character at the end of the day. Yeah. Who thinks they're doing the right thing for whatever reason they think is the right reason. So
the death god comes and visits him.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this conversation, and the death god says, "So you're going to use this to kill people who deserve to die?" And he says something to the effect of, "Yeah, I'm."
So you want to use this at all by any chance, or you want to give up ownership of it? I'll take it back.
Yeah.
And then Light kind of opens up the book. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm just getting started.
And the death god basically, rubs his hands and says, "This is going to be fun.
This will be fun and interesting."
Yeah.
So then what happens in the second chapter? Or do you want me to paint that picture?
Oh, you go ahead.
So the second chapter is really the point in which if you won't know you're going to be interested in this series or not. Because in comes the rival.
Yeah.
So,
we need to back up, though, because there's an important piece we're missing. Light decides that he's going to let everybody die of a heart attack because then the world will know
that somebody's doing it.
It's somebody specific doing it, and that it's being done with intent. And he thinks that the result of that will be that it scares people into behaving well.
Yes.
That people will stop being thieves and robbers and rapists.
The intention that if you get rid of all the bad people, the good people will either rise to the top, or everyone will be so fearful of
having the heart attack
that they won't actually try to do anything bad. It'll be like their own like little what was the Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder saying like, "Don't do this, you might die."
Yeah, and he's very intentional, and I think that's important to know.
Yeah, because he's not going after random people, and he's certainly not going after just bad people. He's going after.
And he's not going after people who piss him off.
No, he's going after the worst of the worst. Like people who've either gotten away with murder, or people who have murdered a lot of people, people who have raped and pillaged,
repeat offenders.
Yeah, people are just like probably like the scum of the earth that won't ever get justice, or even if they did get justice, like that the world would be just so much better without these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's a 17-year-old making this decision.
Yeah.
And part of what the story talks about too, towards the end of the first chapter, is that this is sort of screwing him. He's losing his concentration for his schooling.
Yes, it's kind of taking a toll because he's so focused on this now that he's not quite paying attention to all of his schoolwork.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the interim between the first chapter and the second chapter, it's been maybe, let's say, about a month or so since he started killing people. And people have picked up on it. So, which is interesting, which I love this portion. I love what they call him here. They call him Kira. So they call him Kira,
yeah.
which in Japanese means God.
Yeah.
But in the sense of the way they're trying to use it here, it has a dual meaning to it, because in Japanese, kira sounds a lot like killer. So it's intentional that not only is he a killer, but he's God at the same time.
Fine.
So they've created so he ends up taking this alias of Kira, which he didn't make everyone just kind of pushed it onto him, and so he just takes his hands and says, okay, yeah, fine, that's what the world is calling me, that's what I am. But I'm not, it's not like I have like a big...
But nobody knows who he is.
No, nobody knows who he is, so...
They just know that he exists.
Yeah, so the TV comes on one day, and there's a person who introduces himself as Lind L. Taylor. He announces himself to be the world-famous detective L, which they've kind of hyped up a little bit as being like the world's greatest detective, just a single letter L. And so Lind L. Taylor basically goes to the point of saying, Kira, if you're out there, what you're doing is wrong. Vigilante justice is not justice, you're just a murderer. You have to stop. And basically, he pisses off Kira. He pisses off Light at the end of the day. Light just decides, fine, I'll show you my judgment at the end of the day. Big, bright letters in the notebook here, in all English, just writes his name out. Because, mind you, Lind L. Taylor is saying this in mostly English with a Japanese translation.
Right.
So, and so what happens? Lind L. Taylor dies. He's dead. He dies right on television, live. After he's told everybody, this is broadcasting all over the Japanese area, to try to, let Kira know what he's doing is wrong and for him to stop.
Yeah.
And then comes on the screen with this very stylized L. And it's now a monochrome sort of computer voice that's coming out of it now. That says, wow, I didn't realize you could really do that. That's amazing. Let's see if you can do it again. Kill me. Come on. Come on, Light. Or come on, Kira. Do it.
Yeah. Taunting him.
So you can't do it. So that means you need certain requirements to do this. Thanks for the knowledge. I'll give this little bit of knowledge to you, though, first. I want to let you know, this wasn't broadcasting all over Japan. This was only broadcasting in the Kansai region of Japan.
So I know where you are.
So I now know where you are.
Yeah.
And I know where to start my investigation. And never mind, Kira, I will bring you to justice. So the rest of this entire manga is this cat and mouse game between Light and L, trying to figure out who's going to figure out which one is which first. And it takes a very odd turn midway through, but it's one of these stories where the psychology of the entire thing is kind of the most interesting bit of it here, I think.
Well, you already know that Light's going to find this whole thing draining because he's already impacted by the act of killing. Mm-hmm. Because when you begin this whole thing, he's actually just a really good kid. Yeah, no,
he's a morally decent person at the end of the day, but he's just bored.
He is bored.
Oh yeah, no, he makes a very good point of saying like, I'm just so bored.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything around him is very boring. This life is up its life.
And easy, and yeah.
And
he's so smart.
Yeah, and the notion that he has this book now is kind of this other thing, but he's got to be like mentally sharp and keep going, because if they figure out who he is, then he goes to jail and will probably die. And the last thing he really wants to do is die.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I love about this manga here is it creates...
Well, and then the other thing is, if he goes to jail, what happens to the notebook?
Yeah.
Who gets it next?
Who will get it next at the end of the day? Will it become will it get destroyed itself? Will it become an investigational tool? Will it get used by the police? Will it be used by governments for good reasons?
Could fall into a hands. Yeah.
Yeah, like who actually gets to say who will use this book? So he's kind of got to keep it safe from just about every other yokel out there who might use it for whatever reason they think is a great idea to use it.
Yeah. So he's got 101 concerns.
Yeah. But what I love about the story here is that it's an interesting dilemma here between which is the correct justice. Is it, justice by law, or is it vigilante justice? I mean, because justice by law doesn't always get you doesn't always get you to justice that you really want. But then at the end of the day, like, vigilante justice is a person who they think is what justice is at the end of the day, which is the right way to go at the end of the day. Do you leave it to the hands of society, or do you leave it up to the hands of one person? And that's kind of a topic that's discussed throughout the manga here on a certain level, that who is right is who is wrong. Is it society who gets to judge, or is it a single person that should be the one to decide to judge?
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting dilemma. It's a great show that goes back and forth. And it's had a lot of adaptations, especially available on Netflix. So so the original Japanese animation series follows the story very, very well. It's beautifully done in English, which again, all these shows have English versions of them, with one or two exceptions of them here. Most of these have English versions of them out there. But it's beautifully done in English. I love the cast for it. It's very well done. But if you ever have to watch something, just watch the anime. There was an American movie that came out that's available on Netflix. It does not follow the story. It's an American version of the story. And I feel that it's not the same sort of story being told. I can appreciate if it was being told in a different way, but it's just not the same sort of vigilante versus societal justice sort of thing.
Well, and it has sort of a feel of, to me, it had sort of the feel of a bounty hunter sort of thing, and so it reminded me very much of sort of a Western in its own way.
Yeah, kind of like trying to find the bad guy here and everything.
Yeah.
What do you think of the characters so far that you've read?
I kind of feel like Light is emotionally lost.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with that.
But again, part of that because you do get the candor of his thought process.
Yeah, that like you kind of know at the end of the day here that like
he's conflicted.
Oh yeah, no, he's very conflicted about what he's doing, but he's also a little bit twisted by his power that he has as well.
There's a point where the Shimigami says, "Oh, this is going to be fun," and it is specifically because
just to watch the chaos and drama happening.
Well, because you see Light come into the realization of how much power he has.
Yeah, and
because he doesn't want to give the notebook back.
No. So when you look at this art versus like Full Metal Alchemist, there is a very clear stylization in this in Death Note here.
Yeah, there is.
It's a very realistic tone because it's set in kind of a realistic modern setting, but it's like just much crisper and cleaner seeming, isn't it? Especially
there's a lot more white space.
A lot more white space, a lot cleaner. Like it's just, I find the artwork in this to be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and no, of all of them, this is probably my favorite in terms of the artwork itself.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, so the next one we're going to do here is Kuroko no Basket. Now, this is the basketball anime that we watched initially back in the day, so we're getting to the manga, and we're actually doing the same chapters for the episodes we watched back in one of our very first episodes here. So we kind of already know the story. It's the story of a high school basketball teams fighting for each other to get to the finals of the winter tournament, and teenagers with like not necessarily supernatural, but kind of like super phenomenal sort of abilities.
Yes, it's a hyper skill set.
Yeah, so
a hyper skill set.
Yeah, and so these are the chapters in which Anamane like you get the notion here that Anamane has been bored for a very long time, and finally he's met somebody that's worthy of him going into the zone.
The zone. So I and I was really looking forward to seeing exactly how the zone was depicted. Mm-hmm. So it literally talks about it as you have to train for hours, and even if you train and you put in all this effort,
you might barely get to be able to stand in front of the door. Right?
Yeah, it's not going to come to you very often.
Mm-hmm.
It literally says it still only opens
a handful of times,
on
very,
rare
very
occasions.
rarely.
Yeah, and when you enter it, you enter a sacred place that actually draws the door.
Yes.
And unless I'm not remembering correctly, you don't see the door.
It was there. But
It was there,
but not in quite the way that it was depicted here.
Okay, so it's depicted as sort of an ancient
kind of like gilded sort of like wood door.
Yeah, wood door with all sorts of trim on it. Like it's very old and very revered
sacred.
And he refers to it as it's a sacred place.
Mm-hmm.
And then he opens it by force.
They're just grabbing a hold of the doors and just shoving it open.
And going through it is actually painful.
Mm-hmm.
He says that and you see the effort that it took
to push
him
it open.
to push it open. and you see that drawn.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have that same sense when I saw it in anime.
Yeah, in the anime, it felt like it was just kind of more like a switch almost. Like he opened up the doors
You went into it,
and you went
and
into
in part because if I recall correctly, there was sort of color and light and
like there was like it is in like a dark expanse, and then you kind of get this embrace of light.
Yeah,
and so it feels like you just kind of like walked into the light, and there was nothing difficult about doing that. Versus here in the manga form, it seems like it was a real test to kind of like open the real issue, or maybe even like a
struggle
to open up those doors, and then the second he's in there, like you fade back and he's just got this kind of semi-blank look on his face, and
he's covered in sweat, and he actually talks about it. It was painful.
Yep.
And you can see the pain on him.
Oh yeah.
So I it was an interesting comparison. I'm glad that I had seen the anime beforehand,
because it would paint this a little bit better for you, we think.
Yeah, it wasn't in the anime, I don't think it was as dramatic.
Okay.
I was really interested in it in the anime. It actually really struck me. But I don't think it was as dramatic as it was
in the manga. And I think that's the reason. I think the reason for that is that you get a lot more of the internal dialogue that kind of happens between characters. And so it feels a lot more dramatic because you're realizing that these characters' looks on their faces are not just these looks on their faces. They're you get these kind of sense and understand what they're thinking when it happens, and then you get this little narration about what happens when you open the door, and that few people ever get a chance to stand in front of the door, much less get opened.
And even if you do all the work to get to it, which talks about that virtue of effort, even if you do all the work to get there, and he talks about you have to train for hours and you have to put on all this
years
effort,
and days, all this work that you do,
and be dedicated. And he talks about the dedication. You still can stand in front of the door, but you may not be able to open it.
No, you might.
It doesn't open for you on command.
Yeah, you might just be on the verge of getting there, but these doors kind of stop you from getting there. But yeah, no, So what's interesting about this here is you watched the anime before you read the manga. In a lot of the cases, it's completely the reverse. A lot of times we read the manga before you actually ever get to the anime, and so sometimes we get to see, especially when we get to like fight scenes, or in this case, the basketball matches here, we get to actually watch the actual matches kind of play out, and sometimes it makes a little bit more sense when you watch it being played out, versus if you're just getting like still after still after still. It's not immediately apparent where all the players are on the field and where everything is. Like half the fun of watching a basketball game in itself is just watching all the characters moving around at the same time. And while you might be focused on one character, one player, you might still be focusing on like 3 or 4 other players around the area, like what will happen if he does this, this, and this, and he's moving around, but now
where this is being very specific with your attention.
Yeah,
your attention
whoever
is
has
only
the ball,
what's drawn.
Yeah, whoever has the ball and whoever's doing that. So like
that's actually a really good observation, because what you have is a square.
Yeah,
you have a 4x4 square that you're looking at.
You have a picture frame at the end of the day.
Yeah,
and you're only able to see whatever's in the picture frame, so long as you can see whatever's in the picture frame.
Yeah,
but you can't see everything because in a lot of cases the picture frame is not like in the typical sort of basketball sense that we might see on TV, where you get the entire like half court here. The picture frame is literally like 4.5 inches away from a person's face.
It's demanding your attention to a very localized area. Yeah, so that's an interesting thought. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, so that's something you kind of get, and especially when you get to like fights in some cases, like some fights are animated just as they're drawn in the manga, and sometimes you might just get the key points that were in the manga that get translated as a fight, because when you're animating it, they don't quite one-to-one line up in some cases, but that happens there. But I know this is one you would continue to keep reading if you had the option to.
Yeah, so it was interesting because, as you said, you're not reading it for the action.
No, you're kind of reading it. I mean, like, you could very much follow along with the basketball game element of it here and be kind of incensed that, they're only 3 points behind. That means that they're just like 2 shots away they're just 2 shots away at any particular point from being on top and being ahead.
Yeah.
But like a lot of it's not about the game itself, but it's about the characters kind of fighting with one another through the game.
Yeah.
And the character kind of again, especially with a lot of the episodes of Kuroko no Basket, it's a lot about interacting with different characters, and every kind of character leaving a match with either more weight about how they understand the rest of the world or coming to a realization about the world here.
I think all of it to me comes back to the opening line in Full Metal Alchemist, which is that the painless lesson is without meaning.
Yes.
And that is something that replays through all of these.
Oh yeah. So,
yeah.
Alrighty, so let's move on to the next one here, which is Card Captor Sakura. This was a very pretty looking one, wasn't it?
Okay, so honest to goodness, I could see Mia, who is again 8,
Yeah.
enjoying this and reading this.
Mm-hmm.
I dearly
amazingly
wished.
pretty.
Yeah. Okay. So my first comment is, see right there, would love to see in color.
Yes.
I would. It does have a color page, but
it has that kind of like various sort of like ethereal kind of look to it.
It is very Sailor Moonish in some ways, except it's so beautifully. It's beautiful. It is very Sailor Moonish in terms of the style.
Oh yes. Well, in this case here, what it is, it's a what this is here is a example of a shoujo manga, where they tend to be a lot more prettier looking in a lot of cases. Because again, it is aiming for an audience that is primarily of a female nature at the end of the day, and again,
and a young female. I mean, she's a 4th grader.
Yeah. So I mean,
She's
like
a 4th grader.
But yeah, I mean, like these are a lot of characters. I mean, like
Oh yeah. And what I'm looking at is a screen full of covers of it, which are Sakura in color.
Yep.
Yeah. So you very much got
a lot of pastels, a lot of very light kind of colors, not a lot of dark colors in contrast.
And this is exactly what I would have expected it to be in my head from what I was reading.
Oh yeah.
So the first thing I noticed was they set it in the opening scenes of it feature the Eiffel Tower.
Yep.
So that you know where you are.
So it's actually not the Eiffel Tower. That's actually Tokyo Tower.
Oh, that's Tokyo Tower.
So Tokyo Tower.
So I don't know where I am.
No, so you're technically in Tokyo, and Tokyo Tower is kind of a homage to the Eiffel Tower. They look very similar, but they're not exactly the same.
Because I'm thinking, how interesting. Because I'd read an article that said that the French were very much into manga.
Oh yeah, no, they're very much into the Japanese manga. There's actually a couple different French anime that's out there, and
so I was thinking, oh, how cool this is. So I was wrong there. I'll change my notes there.
That's okay.
Okay, so Card Captor Sakura. She's a 4th grader. She is collecting Clo cards.
It kind of highlights it a little bit more in chapter 2, where her father is an explorer or an archaeologist.
And he's got a library full of books.
She accidentally opens up one of the books, which is known as the Clow book, from a famous wizard that was known as whose last name was Clow, and he made all these cards called the Clow cards that have all these different kind of elements and things that are throughout them. And she opens it up and releases all the cards into the world. And her job is to recollect all the cards. She's got kind of a magic wand that kind of doubles as a baton a lot of the time.
And then she has a pet.
She's got a little
and it actually says in there, I'm not a cat, I'm not a dog, I'm not a stuffed animal.
Nope.
Although it's drawn very much to look like a stuffed animal. And to me it looked kind of like a mouse.
See, I always thought it was kind of like a bear with wings.
Maybe a bear with wings. Okay.
I could go with a bear.
It does have wings. Where's our guy here?
The little guy right there.
Oh, okay. So colored that way, he does look like a bear.
Yeah.
Like a koala almost.
Well, I was thinking more like a grizzly bear a little bit, maybe. Like a very kind of stylized grizzly bear, maybe.
Okay.
Very cute.
So, yeah, it's very, very cute. And he is the guardian of the book.
Yep, he's originally the guardian of the book, and his job is to kind of lead Sakura through the world, which is, again, this is not unusual.
And she does this in her dreams? Am I understanding this correctly?
No, she does it kind of in the middle of the night.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And always with a very, very detailed kind of costume.
Yes.
Which is from her friend, who somehow in her spare time has the chance to make all these costumes for her. Like, any one of these costumes, like, even if you just look at some of these costumes here, like, there's a lot of work going on here. Like, these are, like, some very stylized things here at the end of the day.
She's really poofy dude.
Oh, no. Poofiness would be like the theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so this is the...
And ruffled and flowered.
Ruffles, very poofy skirts all the time.
Yeah.
bows.
Yeah,
I mean,
very
like
poofy
just
dude.
the absolute height of girly sort of like elementary school kind of fashion.
Yep.
So like,
Well, and you have the little stuffed animal, which or the little animal, and if that was something we could find in Japan, I would love to bring.
I'm sure we can find one.
Bring them back for the girls, but and so that's sort of her. If you were an alchemist or what do you call a witch's cat? The witch's cat is a
Familiar.
yes. That's her familiar.
Yes, it is her familiar.
And keeps her company. And then the cards sort of give her magical powers.
Yes, so she touches the wand to the card, and one of them lets her kind of fly, other ones kind of control the wind, and eventually she collects more of these cards that do other things and such. So they all kind of an element of something. Like there's one about time, there's one about like the moon and the sun. There's a couple other ones that do other things.
Well, what I thought was interesting was they seemed to me like they were nature based.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. They all have kind of like this elemental quality to them.
Yeah, so
Yeah, they're all like an element of something.
So to me, it wasn't magic out of thin air. It was magic born of
Some sort of logic that existed in the universe.
See, that's adorable.
Yes, again,
Just
like
little
every
stars and a crown.
every little bit of card Captor Sakura is this like instant win with adorableness. It really is. It's just like because again, it's the absolute like height of like what little girl here, even if you're even like young high schooler, wouldn't like, oh my goodness, that's amazingly cute. Look at this. Oh my goodness, so cute.
Yeah, so I'm figuring it's 8 to 18.
The age range?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of time, again, even shonen, this is shoujo, which is usually, again, means young female or young females. Or it's aimed for that kind of range. And that's usually something between, like, maybe, like, 7, 8 years old, all the way up to, like, you know, early high school, maybe late high school in this kind of a way. Kind of,
so tweeners.
Kind of like, yeah, kind of that range in which you would be, like, ultra cute and not quite trying to be more mature at all in a lot of cases. But again, that's also, like, shonen manga is a lot of the same sense, too, where it's, like, aimed for, like, young boys to, like, high school boys at the end of the day, young adult males. But that's not to say that nobody can enjoy it here. Like, again, I will admit myself, when
I enjoyed it. It's beautifully drawn.
I know, again, I mean, in myself, again, when I read it here when I was 22 years old, I was hardly in the age demographic for it.
Yep.
But it's still, but again, I mean, that goes back to, like, what we said about My Little Pony here, is that it has a wide fan base, despite what it's initially aimed for.
And
that's true of a lot of manga and a lot of anime, that while it's trying to cater to one particular group of fans, like, it could have a wide range of fans.
But again, you do get the, sort of the relationship with the older brother, and you get that glimpse of candor.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, this is like they're trying to be realistic about the lives that they lead at the end of the day. They're not trying to be this idyllic sort of life at the end of the day, even though I think Scar Sakura kind of paints it a little more idyllic. But, like, you see the tension and you see the turmoil with other people, and your relationships are, like, what you would seem to be really true relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that level of introspection that I actually enjoyed a great deal in these.
So, for Americans, this came out on what we know as the WB back in the very late 90s, where you had a lot of push of Japanese animation.
Okay.
And it had an American version just known as Card Captors. It was very heavily edited. So a lot of stuff was actually taken out and not actually ever shown at all for an American audience here.
And edited for what purpose?
Edited in the sense that they wanted this to be, while this very much was a shoujo kind of series for girls, they re-edited it a little bit to introduce the other male character that's kind of the rival to Sakura in the second episode, and actually cut out a lot of the other stuff, because in the anime portion, like, the guy doesn't show up until, like, episode 10, so you've got quite a number of episodes where it's just Sakura and her friend kind of doing all this here.
Yeah.
But they were trying to make it seem like it would be something for both
crossover
guys and girls at the end of the day. But even then, I think with the
I'm surprised by that, because Sailor Moon really, Tuxedo Mask isn't much of a character.
No.
And
But that certainly has its male and female fans as well.
Yeah,
and
it does. You
like
guys watched it.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like it necessarily caters to any one demographic either. Like, you could have it for multiple demographics, much less multiple, people here at the end of the day.
So it surprises me that they felt the need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, like, there's a lot of heavy Americanization for shows. Like, when we get to things like One Piece, or the most famous example here, is Pokemon. In Pokemon, the characters have rice balls, which are basically like these kind of triangular shapes of rice with a seaweed kind of wrap around it. Mm-hmm. In the American version, instead of calling them rice balls, they called them donuts. And they don't look anything like donuts. Yeah, sometimes these rice balls might have like jam filling in the middle of it, but these are not donuts. And they didn't even go through the process of trying to make them look like donuts.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is kind of one of the weird things.
It feeds the narrowness that I would say is
kind of inherent in it. But again, I mean, they did this a lot of time with, the Power Rangers is initially based off of what's in Japan known as Super Sentai series.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of the stories that are in Japanese that when you see them in American are not one-to-one translations, much less even close to that. And there's no continuity between some of those other shows. I think the only one that even gets kind of close to that is like Power Rangers Samurai, which I can't remember the Japanese name for that series, but that one's almost a one-to-one translation because they got the show kind of late and they just did a one-to-one translation instead of trying to come up with other like plots. Okay. But Power Rangers is also kind of a little goofy on its own a lot of the time. Anyways, like you would not take a whole lot to if you just did it as a translated version of it. You could get the same amount of effect as you would from an American version audience doing it versus a Japanese crew of people doing it. Like, you don't need to add a whole lot, especially if you're just really using the suits and the fighting stuff for what is essentially like your actionary sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, Card Captor is cute, very very cute. This is and still kind of is a popular cosplay costume. But ones that don't get done very often. They recently had
a lot of work.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of petiteness you have to be to get to be one of these characters.
So I couldn't be secure.
You could. Again, like cosplay knows no bounds. Okay. But imagine if we had like Mia or Nina in one of these costumes.
Oh gosh, that'd be all kinds.
It's weaponized cuteness there.
They even have green eyes.
I know. Again, it would just it's absolute weaponization there on that.
Yeah.
It would not. Oof.
Yeah.
You could not keep people away from taking pictures of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Totally get it. Okay.
All right. So next one we get to is our example of our 4-comma or Yon-comma series, which is again 4-paneled series. This was Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun.
Okay. So who is this aimed at?
This is a comedy series that's actually in.
Okay, and I do get the comedy.
And it's actually in a fashion magazine.
Okay, so and basically, this is a female artist who's a teenager.
She's a male artist.
Well, he's male, but she's drawing as well. She's outlining.
So the premise of Nozaki-kun is that there's this girl who likes this older.
She has a crush on him.
Like a huge crush on this older guy named Nozaki-kun, and he somehow, like, she ends up getting the courage to then one day talk to him, and he's like, sure, you want to come over to my place? He's like, oh my goodness, he's taking you over to his place. Ah!
What should I do?
What should I do?
Again, you get that self-candor.
Yeah, and then she gets there, and he's like, great, would you like to help me with my work?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm drawing this right now. Would you like to help me outline it? Wait, you're drawing this? It's like, yes, I'm drawing this very, very famous Shoujo manga. So he is himself a mangaka drawing this very pretty, very shoujo-esque series. And actually people think he is a woman because he has a female
stage name, sort of writing name, or
it's not necessarily explicitly female though. Like it's very kind of gender. It's not very gender specific.
Neutral,
yeah. It's like like I'm trying to think of what a great name, like Morgan.
Yeah. Like
Morgan could be both a guy and a girl's name at the end of the day. So he's kind of like a not very gender specific sort of name, and so everyone thinks it's actually this woman that's writing this beautifully detailed love story, and it's actually this guy who actually knows really nothing about love at all writing the story.
But he very arrogantly says at one point, "But I've heard enough love stories to know what I'm talking about."
Yeah.
And I'm like, really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so this is very much a comedy series. It's not that long. I mean, like, at most it's like maybe 15 pages. Mm-hmm. But every page has got like 4 panels on it. And if you just took the panels individually, they are all kind of telling their own little story and jokes at the end of the day. And they make up this entire bigger narrative.
And I want to say, this art was not as elaborate as the others.
No.
So it was much more simply drawn.
Yes. It's a lot of comedy tends to be.
Okay. So it was much more simply drawn, and the facial expressions were often
heavily exaggerated?
Yeah, cartoonish, for lack of a better word.
Yes. Yep, I can see. Yep, that's not uncommon with comedy series where, like, again, the entire point is to try to get the joke across, and sometimes in a manga-based series, you kind of have to be a little bit more exaggerated about it.
Well, you know how I thought about it? As I was reading, I went, oh, it's almost like a laugh track in a sitcom. It's telling you where to laugh.
Yes, it's like the 4th page is basically like, okay, did you get the joke? Great, here's the joke.
Yeah, so I actually found the way it was drawn sort of like an illustrated laugh track.
Mm-hmm. Or almost kind of like reading like Garfield at the end of the day too. Like, because like in like a 3-panel Garfield comic here, like the first 2 panels are the setup, and by the time you get to the 3rd panel, this is where the joke is.
Yeah,
this is how it all becomes funny.
Yeah.
So this is a very kind of light-hearted sort of series. It doesn't take itself super seriously. The characters
I found the girl very self-deprecating.
Oh yes,
and again, that candor that I appreciate.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and then we get to chapter 3 here. We get another character gets introduced. He does all the shading.
Yeah.
Or no, he doesn't do all the shading. He does like all the flowery bits and stuff that's in the manga. And what's actually kind of funny, what I find actually very funny about it here is that the lead female girl is based off of him. So I find that funny because a lot of the characters, when you kind of like dive into it later on, when you meet other characters in the manga are based off of his people that he has come in to do character stuff for him, and they're always usually like a gender flipped version of it here. So, but no, this was a very lighthearted series, very comedy focused.
Interesting that it would be in a fashion magazine, because I sat there thinking as I was reading through it, who is this aimed at? Is this aimed at teenage girls? Mm-hmm. It's a little...
it started in a fashion magazine. I don't know if it's still in there now.
But
moves.
But that gives it some context, though.
Yeah.
Was it aimed at just teenagers in general? Was it aimed at young adults? The guy's kind of a young adult?
Yeah, they're all in high school.
Yeah.
Everyone here is in high school.
Okay.
This has a wonderfully animated series to it as well. I don't know if there's an English version of it out there. I know it is on Crunchyroll. It's very cute, and it's very much kind of like a nice kind of like heartwarming sort of series at the end of the day. All the jokes are kind of in there as well, if sometimes cut out here and there, but repasted. Okay. It's a lot of fun. It was
fun. It was just after the others,
we were very kind of serious semi-stories.
It didn't have the heavy moral tale.
Mm-hmm. No, this one does not.
That the others did. So that was one of the other things. So the two my notes, light, no virtuistic story to it.
No.
And then the art much simpler.
Yeah, this is very much a lighthearted sort of series at the end of the day. Yeah, but would you keep reading this?
It's kind of fun. I want to know if she ever actually admits to him.
For real, like, I actually like you, just confesses,
Yeah, because she starts to, and then it completely goes off the rails.
Not only does it go off the rails, like, the train, like, does, like, 12 cartwheels and then blows up, like, 15 feet away.
Yeah.
And
she very self-deprecatingly says, that did not go as planned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the look afterwards, again, like, they do, like, they have, like, a couple of examples of, like, bicycling together on a tandem bike, and, like, it's really awkward.
Yeah.
Or like holding the umbrella for somebody else when they're walking together, and it becomes really awkward for them. So somehow that finds its way into this manga somehow.
Yeah.
So,
Well, like all comedy, it has to be true to life to make it work.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Next one I want to talk about is Shokugeki no Soma, or as it's been translated to in America as Food Wars. This is kind of like an Iron Chef sort of series, or a playoff of it here. Now, I didn't have us read the first chapter because I felt the first chapter gave a lot away. So I had to start at the second chapter because the first chapter, I think kind of gives away the entire game to the thing a little too quickly, as where the second one is really where the story actually starts. And if they never had the first chapter, I think you'd be perfectly fine.
Okay, Food Wars, the family owns this kid has competed in and lost again.
Lost numerous times to his dad, who was actually a world-renowned chef working at like a daily sort of like menu-based restaurant.
Well, he has his own restaurant.
Yeah, so
there's a family restaurant.
So there's a family restaurant, but the family restaurant's like a kind of like a menu, kind of like a lunchtime menu sort of restaurant. Like you go in, you go from the menu, and they cook whatever's on the menu, and they give it to you. But it's like just. But in the first chapter, which doesn't quite highlight it all well, the dad's actually like this world-renowned chef that's kind of disappeared off the culinary stage to just have this very simple life of amazing food. And the son is never actually beaten his dad ever once before.
The son just plays around in the kitchen, and he's apparently had some failures.
Oh yeah, he's had a lot of failures, but
okay. So one of the things that struck me early on this. And here's my actual comment: sexual squid.
Yeah.
And so he makes a squid dish and serves it to. Is that his younger sister? Who is that? A young girl.
It's just another person in the restaurant.
Okay, so it's a young girl, and she willingly takes the dish, and then she actually says, I feel like I've been molested by a squid. And it's a very sexual drawing. It's a 2-page spread of her.
You did read the first chapter.
Oh, was I not supposed to?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
That's the first chapter. It's okay.
That's the first chapter. Okay. So it's a very, there are a couple of, anyway, so I'm
it's
like.
It's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I don't recommend the first chapter usually.
Okay.
It's okay. I mean, one of the things with this show here is that at the end of the day here, it's often my best way to describe this here is that I want to describe it as food porn, which is not the way you think it is.
No, it's not the way. Okay, let me move it forward. So apparently that was the first chapter. Okay, so
I did have a start on the first chapter. My apologies. I thought we were on the second.
Okay, so this real estate developer. Why are real estate developers always bad?
I don't know.
It's unfair to my profession. Anyway, real estate developer comes in. And this is one of those virtue things. Real estate developer comes in and she says something. She basically makes him commit to, if they're ever not able to serve this dish that they're well known for, some really
any food in general.
Yes, the sexualized squid. This is so wrong.
I will put this picture in our show notes here for everybody to kind of see. It's not right.
It's not right. It's just, I'm like, wow, where did that come from? She's eating a dish in a restaurant, and this is the next thing you see. So the real estate developer comes in, and she is all
like hoity-toity, like kind of like.
Well, she's hoity-toity, slutty. She's sort of. I'm trying to think of anybody I could even liken her to. Almost Dolly Parton-esque in terms of her figure. She's kind of in a suit, but her boobs are hanging out all over the place. Mm-hmm. So she's drawn kind of Jessica Rabbit-ish.
Yes, I can go with that. Okay,
and so she comes in and she gets him to commit to somehow, if the restaurant couldn't serve this amazing meat dish, if they couldn't serve an amazing meat dish, that they would close forever.
Yeah, and then she would be more than happy to buy it up as a result.
Yeah, she wants the land for something, and you get the impression she's been in there before, made offers before, and been
They've
told
always
no
turned
before.
them down, yeah.
Yeah. So, so she makes that commitment, and then the next day, he comes home from school, and his father has closed up the restaurant, and is going away. He's not going to be back for several days.
Mm-hmm.
Don't bother to open it.
Yeah, don't open the restaurant. I'm going to be gone for a few days. But he comes back and all the meat has been thrown on the ground, like it's all it's all been left out and it's not fresh anymore.
And then the sign over the thing has been sort of splattered out with stuff,
like graffiti almost.
Yeah. And the restaurant has just basically been destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And then in comes the lady developer with her 2 henchmen, and she says, "Cook me the dish.
Cook me a dish, and if you can't do it, like you said, you should close down, and I'll be more than happy to buy this."
Well, and the idea that he would somehow honor
why you would honor something that seems quite so forthright to be just like a sham.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, honest actors do honest things.
Okay. So he goes back into the kitchen, and prior to this, you'd seen him basically with several failures.
Oh yeah, lots of failures.
So, so he goes back into the kitchen and he creates an amazing dish out of eggs and bacon and rice. Potatoes. And he wraps it all up and he serves it to her. And it actually fits the description of a dish with marbled meat, which is, I think, what he's required to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "But this isn't what you committed to. This isn't, so hand me over the restaurant." He says, "That's fine. I'll take this away," because she's enjoying eating it. And she can't part with the food because it's so good.
Oh yeah.
In the meantime, the father now comes back, and he is going to work for a friend.
He's going to go work for a friend. And so,
yeah, what is that about?
Okay,
this is where's is that the picture of her right after she's eating it, and
yes.
She looks like she's okay. So
again, when I say food porn, I don't mean in the sense that it's like watching a person eat and enjoying watching somebody eat for like the sexual purposes of that. No, I mean food porn is in people eat food and suddenly porn happens.
Yeah. So there's pictures. There's another picture too of her and the henchman also eating.
Oh yeah.
And literally, they are in orgasmic positions.
Mm-hmm.
They are enjoying the food so much that they are suddenly naked, and
for all the world to see.
In the throes of yes, there we are, naked and in the throes of absolute busty ecstasy. So yeah, when you say food porn, it's just.
I mean it quite literally. Not,
yeah.
Yeah.
And it struck me out of the blue because I'm thinking this is about cooking.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but they had to find a way to get their fan service in there. So.
About cooking. It's really not. Anyway, so the father goes off and works for a friend's restaurant.
Yeah.
And leaves the son, and the son says, "But I thought I was going to run the restaurant."
So you're not old enough to run the restaurant. Why don't you go to this cooking school, and why don't you see what you can do there first?
Yeah,
it's the same cooking school the dad went to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he gets there and he meets this girl who is just grade A bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does not allow anybody to even try to feed her at the end of the day. She's got what she calls what the world is called like God's tongue at the end of the day. Like it's the best. Like she's
the most distinguished taster ever been.
That has ever been. Yeah. And so he's up to the challenge. He's like, well, fine, I'll cook you something. And he cooks her something, and she is not willing to admit that she likes it at the end of the day, but she likes it.
She withholds her orgasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That first chapter doesn't do any justice to the rest of the series, but a lot of that happens. Unfortunately. But no, again, I mean, what's interesting about this about this manga here is that at the end of some of the chapters here, they give the actual recipe that they did and how to make all this stuff. And people have actually gone through quite a bit of I know a blog that's out there that's like, yeah, we're cooking food from Shokugeki no Soma today. And they actually cook it, and it's like, well, yeah, I don't know if I did it quite right, but based on the instructions I have, let's dig in. Hey, this is pretty good. So all this is realistic stuff at the end of the day, and they actually go into a lot more discussion about why they do X, Y, and Z things, and how the chemistry of doing X, Y, and Z makes the food do this, do A, B, and C.
Well, he explains. I mean, even with the dish that he makes for the female real estate developer,
Mm-hmm.
he explains how he did it and why he did it,
And why he used X, Y, and Z materials to do it, and what kind of
and what they add to it, and wrapping the bacon around and the whole 9 yards. So it was sort of cooking techniques and unexpected sexual positions and food.
Would it be amazing if I told you that the person who drew this was also used to be a chef at one point, or was training to be a chef?
I absolutely see that.
So, So what if I told you that the person who did Fullmetal Alchemist was originally going to be working on a cow farm? And the reason that she doesn't work on a cow farm is because she didn't want to work on a cow farm and wanted to pursue her life of art.
That's pretty cool.
So actually, when she finished up Fullmetal Alchemist, the woman who was doing that actually started a new manga called Silver Spoons, and it's literally about a high school that's actually on a farm. So it's her just kind of like reenacting her own life growing up after a certain point, which I find kind of cute and endearing at the end of the day. I find it very interesting.
So now that we've sort of gone through them.
Well, we've got one more.
Okay.
But Shokugeki no Soma, I get the feeling that this would be kind of a hard thing to kind of sell you on, keep reading at the end of the day.
Well, okay, so the art visually was much darker.
Darker as in more mature, or darker in the sense of like a lot more lines and art and shading?
Both.
Okay.
Lots more lines and shading, much more complete in its own way.
Yes.
Than the others, much more detailed.
Especially in some certain shots.
Yeah, and also much more mature.
Yeah, but this ran in Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
So this was aimed at young adults.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. So you see that.
Yeah, and so the last one we have here is called Bokutachi wa Benkyou ga Dekinai na. And I apologize for my butchering of the Japanese language, but it translates into English as "We never learn."
We never learn.
We never learn, and it's and I chose this mostly because it's kind of the example of a little bit of a harem sort of series, or a harem series, which again is, like we said before, is usually a single guy around a bunch of women, and somehow they're all romantically interested in him. Versus
every schoolboy's dream.
Kind of, yeah. It's very much a wish fulfillment sort of thing at the end of the day. In this one here, there are two characters in here. There's primarily three characters. There's this jack of all trades, everyday, kind of decent, kind of studied kind of kid. And then they've got two super geniuses, one of which is known as this kind of small girl that's known as the supercomputer Thumbelina. She's really great at math, science, physics, all that stuff. She doesn't even need to think, doesn't even need to do her work at all. She does it all the calculations in her head.
Yeah.
And then you have this other kind of literary sort of genius. She knows like classic Chinese literature, English literature. She's like she writes these perfect stories. She's the
super well read.
Yeah, she's the literary sleeping beauty because she's always very sleepy.
Yeah. She
sleeps through class. Like the example they use is that like she slept through most of a essay writing in a class, and then the last 10 minutes wrote this like woke up the last 10 minutes amazing thing that made the teacher break down in tears.
Yeah.
But the high school principal here is basically tasked this one kid to tutor these two girls so that they can get into the college of their dreams, and if that happens, then he will get to go to any college he wants for free because he's broke. Yeah. But come to find out, these two girls don't want to do the thing that they're naturally good at. The one that's in the Thumbelina supercomputer here doesn't want to go into a science or math kind of degree. She wants a liberal arts degree.
Yeah.
and the one that's not good at any math or in the other one here, who is the literary Sleeping Beauty,
yeah.
she wants a science degree, in which neither of them are capable of getting at all. They get like failing grades in these, and the intention is that they need to kind of work together to get smarter to be able to get into the schools they actually really want to get into. And the manga does a pretty good job of explaining that, like, the reasons why at the end of the day. So, Sleeping Beauty here, she's always fascinated with the stars because she thinks that her mom is somewhere up in the stars, and so she wants to study the stars more. And you got to do that with a science degree at the end of the day.
Yeah. Versus
Thumbelina here really is into board games at the end of the day, but she's not any good at it because she doesn't understand human psychology at all, and to be able to play against them, and so to be able to make games like that herself one day so other people can have fun like she does, she needs to get a liberal arts degree to kind of understand how people think at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that's where the entire plot of the story goes, mixed in with a little bit of, oh my goodness, I think I kind of like one of them here or there, or I'm just sexually triggered by anything they do.
Yes.
Romantically triggered.
Yeah, so he's like fighting this attraction thing, while he's fighting the frustration thing of trying to get them
to learn, and they just
can't. He doesn't know how to motivate them, and so. Well,
he's doing all the stuff you would typically do if you were tutoring somebody, but he comes to realize that, like, that's not the way that's going to work over here, and it's just not working at all.
Yeah, it's not how you're going to approach them, but he's got a lot at stake, because otherwise he ain't going to college.
Yeah, no, he's not going to go into college, and he's smart enough that he could go into college, but he just couldn't afford it.
Right.
So he needs the scholarship at the end of the day to get through it. And it's kind of interesting because the first few chapters you really do kind of paint it as like he's a really hard worker and he's trying to do his best. He's not great, but he's, but you cannot, fault him for his...
He's virtue driven though, and it kind of goes with the Japanese
philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, because Japanese is famous for working overtime, for apologizing for leaving work before everybody else.
It's also common for people to sleep on trains on their way home because they've overworked themselves, and often it's a great sign of, it's considered like a badge of honor if you have to sleep on the train going home.
Yeah, so I mean, you see those that virtue thing, very much that virtue thing in him, balanced by the distraction of
hormones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like one of them actually, like, the Sleeping Beauty actually falls on his shoulder, falling asleep by accident, and he's, like, perturbed by it. And then later on, Thumbelina accidentally, like, kind of bumps into him, and, like, she hits chest first.
Yeah.
And that just kind of, like, triggers him at the end of the day.
And again, so again, while these might be innuendo in an American, like, 90210 or something like that.
Yeah.
Here, they're more, again, candidly dealt with.
Yeah, like you
it's
really
more
do get
forthright.
You get more of the sense that, like, hey, like, wow, I can't believe this just happened to me, but wow, I really can't do this because, like, I'm trying to tutor them, but God, was that really nice that happened for like a half a second.
So because you have the mental dialogue,
it adds a whole lot more dimension to it. Yeah.
So I would think if you didn't have the mental dialogue, so if this were an actual anime...
It is.
It is?
It is airing right now in Japan.
Does it have the mental dialogue?
No.
That would take away so much from this.
It certainly does, because I actually, just to test myself out here, I read it and then watched it, and then when I was watching it, I thought, wow, this feels really derivative. Is this where it goes? And I find myself enjoying the manga a whole lot more than I am the anime, because the anime feels very derivative and moves at a very quick pace. Like, the first 2 chapters of this manga are covered in the first anime pretty darn quickly. So
my thing was that the things that made it charming, I don't think would be captured without the thought bubbles.
Yeah, and that's what I'm feeling here too. I feel like a lot of this is moving just like feels very derivative, and much as you get the impressions of what they think of why they do X, Y, and Z, I think the dialogue bubbles really do help a lot as far as understanding the thought processes here, because they linger on those like interactions that they have here in the library for just in the anime. That those two scenes are all of like maybe 30 seconds at best, or if that.
Oh, but there's so much in terms of developing the character.
Yeah, and there are a lot in kind of really describing the character's interaction with everybody. The anime here is going to go for like 13 episodes and then just end. I can already see that happening. It's not like this is in Japan. This is not like the next big thing at the end of the day. It's really not.
Okay.
But I mean, like, it's a nice payday for the company here because hey, it's another manga that we got to turn into an anime. Cha-ching. You know, and this will actually make more work for the guy here later on. You know, that when this series ends after like, I'm assuming 500 chapters, because it's got to end at some point here.
Yeah.
If not, I'm assuming like 250 to 300 chapters is what I realistically think this will go to. But when it does end, I mean, like, he'll be able to kind of like rest on his laurels a little bit and start up something brand new shortly thereafter. Yeah. Hopefully something with a little bit more like longevity to it, maybe, because like I always find that part of the problem with high school series is that, especially if you do it in your senior year, you have to play this game of time.
Yeah.
And the problem here is that, like, if you play the game of time, you only ever get one summer, you only ever get one winter, and if you get to those too quickly, you go through the entire year way too quickly.
Yeah.
And then you're left with, you know, not a whole lot to do after a certain point. Like, if you get to the end of it here, like, what else happens? Like, this is what happened with another series called Assassination Classroom, where it's just their last year, and the show kind of prolongs a lot of the different kind of like arcs of stuff for like very, very long periods of time in the manga. But the manga ended only after about 250 chapters, which is really in the long lifespan of a manga not that long. It's only maybe 5 years, which is kind of short. You expect a lot of series with to be anywhere in the 300 to 400 or even 500 range before they finally end, which is like 10 years when you think about it. And then obviously,
but how do you do 10 years with characters that don't age?
And that's kind of a bit of a problem here. Like, you have to kind of age them not by their age, but by their emotions. Their emotions and their impressions of how the world interaction changes a lot there. Fullmetal Alchemist, I would wager to say, probably takes place, by the time you get to the end of the series here, probably takes place over about a year, maybe a year and a half at worst.
But it goes on for 20 years in real life.
Oh no! In real life, in real life here is again. I think it ended at like 108, 109 chapters. Okay. Which was the better part of about 9 years worth of work at the end of the day to do it. About almost 10 years worth of story to tell. And that was a monthly series. Yeah. Again, you look at Naruto. Naruto took place over the span of probably about 3 or 4 years, maybe 5, depending on how you think how long certain events take place. Yeah. But even that series, again, after 700 episodes, takes place over a long period of time, and 2 of those years are literally skipped with the explanation of a time skip. Oh. Well, that's not uncommon for some series here. Like, you explain... Well, I mean,
you did see... it's interesting you say that, because you do see flashbacks in here.
Yes. Yeah, flashbacks to, like, older previous lives, or, like, moments that were important to X, Y, and Z, sort of. Yeah. Yeah.
So, which I thought was interesting.
This is one I may continue to read, but I may not watch. I mean, but I don't know how far this gets. If it's anything like the anime that I've seen so far, like, I'm dubious about continuing with this one here. Okay.
Well, and again, my note was simply that I couldn't see this working in anime form, because if you didn't have the internal thoughts, I think it loses its charm.
Yeah, like it does feel a lot loss of charm, I would say. And reading the manga here feels a lot more like it's got a lot more heart and beauty to it at the end of the day. As the anime feels a little soulless, I think maybe is the best way to put that. Like, it's missing something in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Okay.
Alrighty. So what'd you think of your experience in manga here in general?
Well, so as always, well curated. You do that well. I really felt like I got a real selection of different styles in terms of story, in
Heavy
terms
stories, light stories, heavy art, light, more humorous art, less dramatic art, very pretty art.
Very pretty, yeah. So
try to run the gambit.
I mean, because for the very pretty, for the card captor, I mean, my first comment was, would love to see this in color. And that was before I got to the color page.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the styles are so different. The stories were so different, obviously geared to different ages. And what engages me is, again, this sort of intimacy and candor.
Yes. Yeah, there's this intimacy of feeling as if like you're on you're there with them on this adventure, and you're just getting to like you've got a magnifying glass that just let you hear. Like you've got an extra like microphone that you can just kind of plug into somebody's head and be able to like just hear exactly what's coming out of their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I would say as an overall thing is I don't know that even well-written American authors are able to do that. And I think it's actually, if I think about it, it may be one of the things that J.K. Rowling does fairly well, because she does let you
peer into like Harry's mind at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, it's only Harry's mind that you ever get to kind of play in at the end of the day.
That's
you
true.
don't really get to kind of experience what Hermione's thoughts are or what Ron's thoughts are.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't get to see Hagrid's or Snape's at all, but you do get kind of like flashbacks into what they're doing that kind of gives an impression about what they think at the end of the day. But I think different narratives would lose stuff in that particular point here, because again, for Harry Potter, again, it all is about, it's a first-person perspective of Harry Potter's journey through Hogwarts and his life through this magical school that is so foreign to him but kind of natural to everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that if you got to live in other people's heads at any particular point along the way, you would lose something there. But I think and I'll say this just for me, is that as an example, for going back to Full Metal Alchemist, well, you don't get a lot of the internal thought monologues that happen in you don't get a lot of people monologuing their internal thoughts a lot of the time. It does do a very good job of when it gets to the, like, painting the scene quite the right way to give the impression across. Like, the facial structures, I can even go back to Kuroko No Basuke here. The second Imanoue says, like, thanks Tetsuo, thanks Tetsuo, and, like, Tetsuo, and Kuroko, like, kind of, like, turns his head and looks at Imanoue and is like, oh, crap. Like, you get that immediate notice, it's like, oh, shit.
What have I done?
What have I unleashed? And in the anime, they do a very good job of, like, that look on his face, sort of like, what are you saying? And then suddenly, like, shock. Yeah. Oh. Like, something's coming.
Yeah. As
we're, like, in the manga, like, that, to me, that facial structure right there is very much kind of like it looks kind of shocked, but it's hard to tell if it was shocked beforehand or now suddenly shocked.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to paint whether suddenly he's realized something or not, so much as it's just kind of this, like, pained look in his face.
But I enjoyed seeing what the zone was.
Yeah.
I thought
the original version of it that it was.
Yeah, I thought it was depicted much more fully.
Well, I appreciate the fact of the way they got to the zone, but what I loved about Kuroko no Basuke is that the way that they showed how the zone really affects you, it dramatically in the animation here.
Yeah,
you get to.
I was very taken with that.
Yeah, because you see, like, just suddenly, like, he's on a completely different level than everybody else, and he knows it too.
Yeah,
and while you can get that in the manga, it's very much kind of like. Again, kind of like taking a snapshot of different pictures constantly. Yeah. And you don't get the sense of speed and presence and physicality of suddenly being in the zone as you would in the anime, where the anime shows it very much intently of just like, I just walked past you. Big deal. This is nothing. You guys are nothing to me now.
Yeah.
You don't get that sense in the manga, I think, immediately without kind of really trying to focus on it, but in the anime, like, you get to those scenes and you're just like, ooh, now we've gone into fifth gear.
So, no, good point.
Would you consider watching or reading any of these at all?
Well, yeah, I'm very interested in The Alchemist. Death Note entertains me. I like the Shinigami.
Mm-hmm. Those two are very heavy story kind of. Those are very long running, engaging stories at the end of the day.
If I were going to sit on a Saturday afternoon and blow some time with my granddaughters, the card Captor Sakura is cute.
It's amazingly
it's cute. So those would probably be the ones that I would
want to read.
Yeah.
Alrighty, those are good choices here. I do highly recommend Kuroko No Basket. I told you before. There's actually also a football version. Manga here as well. Eye Shield 21.
Hard to envision.
It's not bad. It's a little corny, and the art is very spiky, but it's very fun.
Okay.
I find that to be very fun, and that's also got a really great anime as well. That does a very good job of painting the entire story of it.
So are we going to go into a shop where we can actually pick up a couple of these?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So we are going to be visiting Akihabara, which is known as Electric Light City. Is kind of the nickname for it.
We're staying in Akihabara.
We're staying in Akihabara, yes. And we were only like a few stops away from like major, huge shopping things there.
Okay.
And so there will be. Again, we have an entire day of just walking around Akihabara, going into a maid cafe, and then hopefully maybe seeing an idol show in the evening.
Okay.
But we have the entire day to just kind of walk around and look at stuff and imagine the craziness of stuff. I would love to show you arcade games in Japan because they are something to behold.
I have read about this. Well, I guess our next two
podcasts are going to be about us going to Japan and what we're kind of looking forward to seeing and some of the stuff that we're finding interesting along the way of learning about
and how we're preparing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that'll be a great way to kind of primer us for when we go to Japan, because while we're in Japan, we may not be releasing episodes necessarily, we are going to be discussing what we see every day before we go and when we come back a little bit.
Yep.
And it may not be every day, but we're going to try to do the best we can for that. But I think we're going to have a lot of fun when we're in Japan.
I'm looking forward to it. And I actually want to say I thought this was a good preparation as well. And we can talk about this next week when we're talking about sort of how to get ready for some of the social
kind of stuff here.
Yeah, and so I thought this was a good as a slice into sort of understanding Japanese traditions and how they apply to everyday life. This actually I thought was a good exposure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, well, I want to thank everybody for listening to us once again here. You can follow us at our website here at www.nerdtutorialpodcast.com, where we have all the show notes and images, as well as the podcast. You can visit us on Facebook as well as facebook.com/nerdtutorialpodcast, where we do post. I do like to post some additional reviews on stuff I find interesting. And if you have any comments, thoughts, or opinions, or things that you want to add to the discussion, you can always visit me at nerd_tutorial on Twitter and leave us a message there. But otherwise, from myself and my mom, we want to thank you, and we'll see you guys again next time.
Bye.